Shabbat Shalom, my friends. Welcome back. Our Sedra is Chukat, Numbers 19:1 and following. The marvelous narratives of the fourth book of the Torah continue to unfold before us. We move in our reading from villains to rebellion to family rivalries to the bitter hatred of neighboring tribes. All of these stories have served to shape the narrative, which is the story of our eternal people. Our ways of understanding ourselves, of engaging with God, with viewing human nature, and the relationship of the Jewish people, the world, all bear the imprint of the narratives that come to us through the fourth book of the Torah. Soon, a God-fearing prophet will become our sworn enemy. Last week, the leaders of a princely family turned renegade. The people ceaselessly complain. That's what they do year after year. Even as we read in this week's Sedra, Aaron, Moses' brother, first Kohen Gadol, dies and is replaced by his son. Our Sedra begins with words that seem rather familiar, but they're really not. Vayedaber Adonai el Moshe v'el Aharon lemor. Opening words. And God spoke to Moses and to Aaron, saying, well, why is that so interesting? Because there are only 18 instances in the Torah when God addresses both Moses and Aaron at the very same time. In almost every one of these instances, something of major significance is being announced. A shlichut, a mission, a challenge that the Israelites must now undertake. And so here, what do we find? Welcome to the world of the Para Aduma, the Red Heifer. Mordecai Kaplan, the founder of Reconstructionist Judaism, often used the term, interesting phrase, mitzvah system of salvation. Judaism is a mitzvah system of salvation. Simply put, our pathway to God, toward godliness, toward eternity, is paved with religious obligations, halakha, laws, that we are required to fulfill. We Jews, we're not among those who embrace faith alone as sufficient for us to be able to walk that pathway toward holiness. And we are not among those who view salvation as coming to us primarily through grace. Through what? An undeserved gift act of God. Yes, for us, faith is critically important. Yes, grace does operate in the world as we see it, but the foundation, the paving stones of our road forward will be found mainly in the quality of our commitment to fulfill our religious obligations. Now here's a problem. A mitzvah system obviously requires a way for us to repair our failings. We're human beings after all. We will stumble intentionally or inadvertently. We need to be able to find our way back onto that road leading toward salvation, toward godliness. And that's where the red heifer comes in. What we're going to describe here does not at all seem logical or rational. It is what it is. It's not rational, and it's not logical. It can't be defended or critiqued. Rashi tells us that the legislation surrounding the red heifer, the Para Aduma, is so totally beyond human comprehension that Satan himself throws those texts at us as a way of mocking our commitment to the Torah. Look at this silly, illogical stuff you have in the Torah. This legislation is called a Chukat, a ritual law that is to be followed only because God commanded it. It's not something that we ever could have logically derived for ourselves as a way of responding to God. Now, among things that will bring impurity upon us is what? Encountering, coming close to a dead body, a corpse. If someone touches a corpse, they become impure. If someone is under the same roof as a corpse, they become impure. Someone who has contracted such an impurity, which, by the way, obviously, unfortunately, is not such a rare occurrence, is not permitted to enter the Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple, nor to partake of sacred foods. Quite a liability. So here you have a law, no rational basis. How do you get rid of this normal impurity? It's through that law. How do we repair our failure? We were in a house when someone died there. That's not our fault. How do we lift the restrictions that such an unfortunate event places upon us? So, my friends, we need to be fixed. We need to be purified. We need to be cleansed. How can we do that? So here we're told the priests are to take an absolutely perfect, unblemished red heifer, red in every single hair on its body, slaughter it, burn it into ashes. Sounds like a recipe on a food show. Mix the ashes with a cedar branch, a sprig of hyssop, and crimson wool. Take those ashes, mix them with pure water, and then sprinkle that mixture upon the person who had become impure. You don't use all the ashes at one time, so you save up the ashes for other people who will come with similar kinds of needs. Another paraduma would then be slaughtered as needed to keep the supply of purifying ashes available. Rambam Maimonides noted that the very last red heifer will be slaughtered at the time of the arrival of the Messiah. I don't know, Maimonides feels that somehow right before the end of all time, we'd better get a final purification. Most confounding of all, listen to this. The priests who prepare this mixture of ashes and water are rendered unclean by this process. They become impure. They have to undergo another kind of cleansing. So the red heifer purifies the impure and renders impure the pure. Think of that. Logic? No. No logic, no rationality. It's a chukat. The rules of the game are such that you cannot question the details. This is a ritual law that stands with no basis for explanation, as I said, very deeply. It is what it is. So what does this have to do with us? After all, there is no Beit HaMikdash any longer. The second temple is destroyed in 70 CE. And it really doesn't matter if we can't eat foods that are designated for sacrifices. There are no sacrifices being offered any longer. And there are no longer any priests who are consecrated for the temple service. And by the way, just to point out the obvious, it's extremely difficult to find a totally perfect, pure red heifer. But despite all of that, we do sin. We do violate what we like to believe are the norms and expectations of the Torah. We're human. We may unknowingly eat a food that we have been commanded not to eat, or we've lied, or we have violated our own understanding of what we ought to be doing on a Shabbat or on the festivals, or we have gossiped, or we have cheated, or we have robbed. We've been uncaring. We've ignored the widow, the orphan, the stranger. We may have violated our own sense of justice, or we may have failed to act with mercy, compassion. But then are we lost? Are we somehow beyond repair? There's no red heifer for us today. Our mitzvah system of salvation knows who we are, understands our capacity to falter and to fail, and offers us, interestingly, accessible and reasonable ways to return again to that path toward godliness. Our tradition teaches us of a God who has very high standards, but a God who is quick to forgive those who seek forgiveness. Judaism is demanding. Okay, 613 mitzvot in the Torah, yeah, but each of those mitzvot seem to have spawned hundreds, thousands of additional mitzvot in their wake. These are all the obligations of what it means to be a Jew. But the tradition also says that we have free will, we have freedom of conscience, we know what we believe God wants of us. Not necessarily what the tradition says. We know what we believe God demands of us, and when we choose poorly, and we do, we know that God is a forgiving God who awaits our return. We believe, if you will, that the arc of the universe bends toward constant acts of reconciliation between ourselves and that godliness. Listen to these quotes. The prophet Malachi promises, "Return to me," capital M, "and I will return to you." The prophet Zechariah promises, "Return to me," capital M, "and I will return to you." Jeremiah says, "If you return to me, I will take you back." No one says you have to have a red heifer now, today. With or without a red heifer, parah adumah, the arc of the universe bends toward reconciliation. That's it. What a great, comforting thought with which to embrace Shabbat. The arc of the universe bends toward reconciliation. Have a wonderful Shabbat. Please hit share so that others might join us. And just thank you very much for your continuing participation in this conversation about Torah. Shabbat Shalom.